Empower Audio presents Atomic Habits, the complete motivational summary. Welcome to Empower Audio, where we bring the world's most powerful ideas to life, one inspiring word at a time. In this audiobook, we explore Atomic Habits by James Clear, a life-changing guide that reveals how tiny, consistent actions lead to massive transformation. Every lasting change begins small, just 1% better each day. Through practical wisdom and powerful storytelling, this summary will help you master the science of habit building, reshape your mindset, and unlock the person you were meant to become. You'll discover how to break bad habits and build good ones effortlessly, why identity matters more than motivation, how small actions compound into extraordinary results, and how to design your environment so success becomes automatic. This is more than a summary, it's a roadmap for growth. Listen with an open heart. Take notes if you wish, and let these ideas settle into your daily life. Because your future isn't waiting for a perfect moment. It's built right here, in the small choices you make today. This is Atomic Habits, retold and reimagined by Empower Audio, where motivation meets mastery. Let's start. Atomic Habits, complete audiobook-style summary. Every great transformation begins with something small. A single choice, a quiet moment of intention, a barely noticeable change that starts to shift the direction of your entire life. That's the spirit of Atomic Habits. James Clear wants you to understand that success doesn't come from massive leaps. It comes from the tiny decisions you make every day, the atomic-level changes that compound into extraordinary outcomes. When you hear the word atomic, think of two meanings, something very small and something incredibly powerful. That's what these habits are. Each one might seem insignificant at first, but together they can build or destroy entire identities. If you improve just 1% every day, at first it feels invisible. But at the end of a year, that 1% compounds into 37 times your starting point. Small wins multiplied by time equal transformation. And the same is true in reverse. Small declines, unnoticed at first, slowly erode your potential until you wake up wondering how things slipped so far. Time magnifies whatever you feed it. So the question isn't whether you're making progress. The question is, which direction are you compounding in? Clear begins his journey with a simple truth. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Goals are useful for setting direction. Systems are what actually move you forward. If you focus only on the result, you live in a constant cycle of disappointment and delay, chasing something always just beyond reach. But when you fall in love with the process, progress becomes inevitable. Every great achievement you've seen began with habits that worked quietly in the background. Olympic athletes aren't defined by a single race. They're defined by years of routines. Artists, entrepreneurs, teachers, healers, all of them succeed because their systems make success their default, not their struggle. That's what Atomic Habits do. They make the right thing easy and the wrong thing harder. Now, imagine a block of ice sitting on a table. The room is cold, 25 degrees, 26, 27. Nothing changes. Then at 32 degrees, the ice begins to melt. 1 degree created the visible change, but every degree before it made that change possible. That's the plateau of latent potential, the quiet zone where effort builds invisibly. Most people quit there because they can't see progress yet. They think the work isn't working. But success is never a single spark. It's a gradual accumulation of heat. When you stay patient through that plateau, you unlock breakthroughs that look sudden but were years in the making. Habits are how you embody change. They are the compound interest of self-improvement. Just as money multiplies through interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. What you repeat, you become. And here lies the deeper truth of Atomic Habits. True change is identity-based. Most people focus on outcomes. I want to lose weight, write a book, earn more. But lasting change happens when you shift from outcomes to identity. Instead of, I want to lose weight, think, I'm the kind of person who cares for my body. Instead of, I want to write a book, say, I'm a writer. Every small action is a vote for the type of person you want to become. You don't need unanimous votes. You just need a consistent majority. When your identity and your behavior align, you no longer rely on willpower. You act naturally because that's who you are. Clear breaks down habits into a simple feedback loop of 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. A cue triggers your brain to start a behavior. A craving gives you motivation. A response is the action you take. A reward is the feeling that tells your brain whether to remember it. This loop runs automatically, shaping nearly everything you do. Once you understand it, you can design it. Every good habit is built by reinforcing this loop in your favor. Every bad habit can be dismantled by breaking it. That brings us to the 4 fundamental laws of behavior. Change the core of Clear's method. They're simple, but they transform everything. Make it obvious. Make it attractive. Make it easy. Make it satisfying. When all 4 laws work together, good habits become inevitable. Reverse them, and bad habits fade away. Let's start with the first. To make a habit obvious, you have to bring it into awareness. Most of our actions happen unconsciously. We scroll, snack, speak, and react without noticing why. So the first step is to see clearly. Write out your daily routine from morning until night. Mark each habit as positive, negative, or neutral. Don't judge, just observe. Awareness creates choice. You can't fix what you can't see. Then, design your environment to highlight the cues that lead to the habits you want. Place a book on your pillow to remind you to read. Keep water visible to remind you to drink. Hide distractions. Remove temptations. Make the right action the path of least resistance. Your surroundings shape your success far more than your motivation does. People who seem disciplined are often just well-designed. Once the habit is visible, it has to be attractive. We do what feels good, what looks rewarding, what our brain anticipates with pleasure. So pair the habits you need with things you already enjoy. Listen to your favorite podcast while cleaning. Light a candle when you sit down to meditate. Turn practice into pleasure. Join communities where your desired behavior is the normal one. If everyone around you values health, learning, or creativity, those values will feel natural to you too. Belonging rewires desire. And when temptation appears, flip the script. Make the bad habit unattractive by focusing on its real cost. Think not of the taste of the cigarette, but the breath you'll lose. Not of the pleasure of scrolling, but of the time stolen from your dreams. Desire can't be destroyed, but it can be redirected. Then comes the third law: make it easy. The simpler an action is, the more likely you'll do it. We often fail not because we lack motivation, but because we've built too much friction into the process. The gym is far away. The supplies are hidden. The routine is complicated. Simplify it. Use the 2-minute rule. When starting a new habit, make it take less than 2 minutes. Read 1 page. Stretch for a minute. Open the document. Once you've started, momentum takes over. Reduce friction for good habits. Increase it for bad ones. Keep healthy snacks visible and junk food out of sight. Log out of distracting apps. Design a world that makes the good thing easy. And remember, consistency matters more than intensity. Standardize before you optimize. Make the habit stable, then make it better. Finally, make it satisfying. We repeat what feels rewarding. Immediate pleasure reinforces behavior, while delayed reward fades in memory. So give yourself instant feedback. Track your habits, mark your progress, celebrate small wins. Each checkmark releases a burst of pride and dopamine, your brain's way of saying, do that again. At the same time, make bad habits immediately unsatisfying. Add accountability. Promise a friend you'll stick to your plan. Create a small consequence for breaking it. Humans avoid pain as strongly as we seek pleasure. And remember, the most powerful satisfaction isn't external, it's identity. The feeling of pride that says, I kept my word, I'm being the person I said I'd be. That's the reward that lasts. When all four laws combine, the loop becomes self-sustaining. The cue is clear. The craving is strong. The action is simple. The reward is real. That's when good habits become automatic and bad ones lose their pull. When you start to live this way, the results begin to ripple through every area of your life. The small habits that once seemed meaningless begin to compound into momentum, and momentum changes everything. Suddenly, success doesn't feel like a mountain to climb. It feels like a natural direction your life is flowing in. You don't wake up wondering whether you'll follow through today. You simply do because it's what people like you do. This is the quiet power of identity-based habits. They remove the need for constant decision-making and replace it with natural alignment. The more you repeat an action that reflects your desired self, the more evidence you gather that it's true. Eventually, you stop trying to become that person and simply realize you already are. This is what mastery looks like. It isn't about control or perfection. It's about integration. You've woven the habit into your life so tightly that it no longer feels separate from you. The question isn't, how do I stay motivated? The question becomes, how could I not? Motivation is unreliable because it depends on emotion. Systems are dependable because they depend on structure. You don't need to feel inspired every day. You need an environment and a routine that make doing the right thing automatic. The environment, more than willpower, decides your future. You will always gravitate toward what is visible, convenient, and easy. You might think you're making conscious choices, but most of the time, your surroundings are doing the choosing for you. That's why the small act of rearranging your space can be revolutionary. When you place cues in front of you that signal your desired behaviors, your brain responds automatically. When you hide cues that trigger bad behaviors, temptation fades. You are the architect of your own cues. Even your social environment shapes you more deeply than you realize. Humans are wired for belonging. We imitate the habits of the people around us because fitting in once meant survival. If your friends are readers, you'll probably read more. If they're active, you'll find yourself moving more. If they're ambitious, their energy will pull you upward. So, find groups that embody the qualities you're building. Let belonging work for you instead of against you. Over time, as your habits stabilize, a new challenge arises. Boredom. The things that once required focus now happen automatically, and the thrill of improvement fades. Many people abandon good habits at this stage, mistaking comfort for stagnation. But boredom is not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that you've reached competence. Mastery requires embracing the dull moments, doing the work even when it's no longer exciting. Professionals understand that repetition is not the enemy. It's the foundation of excellence. The amateur seeks constant novelty. The master seeks depth. To stay engaged, adjust the challenge level slightly. When something becomes too easy, increase the difficulty just enough to make it interesting again. When something becomes overwhelming, simplify it until it feels doable. This is the Goldilocks rule, staying at the edge of your ability, where growth feels exciting, not exhausting. That's the sweet spot where focus thrives. Sometimes progress will feel invisible. You'll show up again and again with no obvious reward. But remember the ice cube. The work is still building beneath the surface. One day, the results will burst into view, and what once looked like overnight success will simply be visible compounding. The valley of disappointment always precedes the breakthrough. Patience is the price of mastery. The longer you practice, the more you realize that the external results, money, recognition, success, are secondary. The real reward of habits is internal peace. When your actions align with your values, you experience harmony. You no longer live in contradiction. You become someone you can rely on, and that feeling of self-trust is worth more than any outcome. Consistency does not mean never missing. life will interrupt you. What matters is not perfection, but recovery. Miss once, but never twice. Skipping once is a slip. Skipping twice becomes a pattern. Each time you return quickly, you strengthen the muscle of resilience. The goal is not unbroken streaks, it's unbreakable commitment. There will be seasons when you need to rest. Rest is not failure, it's fuel. Even the most disciplined people have cycles of effort and renewal. You cannot stay in constant growth without grounding. If you feel burned out, your system needs space to breathe. Step back, review, simplify, and then return. The rhythm of growth includes stillness. Reviewing your habits regularly is how you stay awake to your own life. Once a month or once a year, look back and ask what's working and what isn't. Which habits still align with who you're becoming, and which ones feel forced. Let go of what no longer serves you. Real growth includes shedding. Your habits should evolve as you do. Reflection turns maintenance into mastery. As you continue, you'll notice how identity and environment feed each other. Your habits express who you believe yourself to be, and your surroundings reinforce that belief. This is why change rarely lasts if you keep living in the same context that built your old self. To build a new identity, build a new environment around it. Even subtle changes, a new morning space, a reorganized workspace, different influences signal to your brain that something new is happening. Change your space. Change your story. Every action you take is a silent vote for your future. You don't have to win every vote, but you do have to keep voting. Each small effort compounds into evidence. Over time, those tiny votes write a story. That story becomes your identity, and identity determines destiny. In the later chapters, Clear turns to advanced strategies how to refine and elevate your habits once they've taken root. Mastery, he explains, isn't about doing more. It's about doing less, but better. It's about returning to the fundamentals with deeper awareness. You simplify, then you deepen, then you simplify again. The beginner asks, "What should I do next?" The master asks, "What can I remove that no longer matters?" Simplicity is the final form of sophistication. When you want to accelerate progress, don't add pressure, add clarity. You can improve any habit by measuring it, tracking it, and learning from it. But measure the right thing. It's easy to fall into the trap of chasing numbers instead of meaning. The point of tracking isn't to obsess over data. It's to build awareness. Feedback helps you refine your approach, but identity gives you direction. Never confuse metrics with purpose. Another truth: rewards and consequences matter most in the short term. In the beginning, external motivation helps you stay on track. But long-term sustainability depends on intrinsic reward, pride, peace, and identity. Eventually, the doing becomes the reward. You keep the habit not for the results, but for the relationship you've built with yourself. That's when the system becomes self-sustaining. As you refine your habits, you'll encounter plateaus. These are not signs of failure, but invitations to adapt. When progress slows, look for friction. What part of your system feels heavy or outdated? Often, small tweaks, a new time, a shorter version, a simplified trigger are enough to restart momentum. Growth never stops, but it often changes shape. Surround yourself with people who remind you of your potential. We rise to the standards of our environment. If everyone around you normalizes excellence, you'll absorb it effortlessly. If you're surrounded by mediocrity, even your ambition starts to shrink. Choose wisely whom you let shape your normal. Belonging is powerful medicine. Take the right dose. There's also a deeper rhythm beneath all of this, the dance between structure and spontaneity. Systems create safety. They give you rhythm and predictability. But creativity requires freedom too. Leave space for curiosity, for experiments, for days that don't go according to plan. Flexibility keeps habits alive. Rigidity suffocates them. The best systems breathe. With time, you'll notice how every habit connects. Eating well supports sleep. Sleep supports focus. Focus supports discipline. Discipline supports peace. There is no separation between physical, emotional, and mental habits. They're one ecosystem. Improving one area naturally uplifts the others. Success is holistic. When habits are strong, your life feels lighter. You stop wasting energy on decision fatigue. You trust your system. You show up. You create. And life begins to feel like flow instead of friction. This is when you realize habits aren't restrictions, they're freedom structures. They remove chaos so you can move gracefully through your day. And yet, the book reminds us that there's always more to learn. Mastery never ends because identity never stops evolving. What works for you at one stage might limit you at the next. The courage to reinvent yourself, to rebuild your habits from a higher perspective, is the mark of true growth. Reinvention is not inconsistency, it's evolution. The person who built one level of success isn't always the same person who will build the next. Sometimes, the habits that once protected you start to confine you. Reflection and awareness let you notice when it's time to upgrade. Change again. Refine again. Return to fundamentals again. Growth is circular, not linear. This is why Clear ends with humility. He doesn't promise perfection, he promises possibility. Atomic habits are not about control, they're about alignment. They give you the tools to live intentionally, to become the author of your own behavior instead of a reader of your old scripts. They remind you that small choices matter because you matter. The habits you practice daily are the way you cast votes for the life you wish to lead. The only real question is, who are you voting for today? Each day is a fresh ballot, and time will count the votes faithfully. Each morning becomes a quiet opportunity to begin again. You don't need to wait for a new year or a Monday. The smallest action today can realign the entire trajectory of your week. That's the hidden beauty of atomic habits. They're forgiving. You can always restart. The moment you take one conscious breath, one deliberate step, you're already back in motion. The power was never in perfection. It was in returning. This way of living changes how you see success. You begin to care less about dramatic transformations and more about steady alignment. You stop chasing the next breakthrough and start tending to the foundation. You start noticing that the people who appear to leap ahead aren't faster. They're simply consistent longer. They've mastered the art of doing small things well and letting time amplify them. Patience becomes your ally instead of your frustration. Over time, your habits form a kind of quiet infrastructure beneath your life. They're the invisible architecture supporting everything else. When your systems are solid, you can handle turbulence with grace. Challenges still come, but they no longer knock you off course. You bend, adjust, and keep going. This stability gives you freedom, the freedom to create, to rest, to experiment without fear of collapse. Think about the compound effects of the smallest changes. One writer commits to a single paragraph each morning. A year later, she has a book. One parent chooses to listen with full attention for 5 minutes a day. A year later, their relationship feels warmer, safer. One business owner saves a small percentage each week. A year later, they have options and breathing room. The difference between stagnation and success isn't dramatic effort. It's tiny consistency multiplied by time. Habits also teach humility. They show you that greatness isn't about bursts of brilliance, but about quiet persistence. Every expert was once a beginner repeating simple basics. Every thriving relationship grew from small gestures repeated over time. Every healthy body was built by thousands of ordinary meals and movements. Habits strip away the illusion of luck and reveal the truth of cause and effect. And when you truly grasp this, frustration turns into faith. You no longer panic when progress feels slow because you understand how growth hides. It hides in repetition, in patience, in invisible accumulation. The bamboo tree spends years growing roots underground before it ever breaks the surface. Then, in one season, it shoots upward faster than you can believe. You are the same. When you nurture your habits, your roots are strengthening, even when nothing seems to happen. Sometimes, transformation comes from subtraction, not addition. Removing one unhelpful habit can free more energy than adding 5 new ones. Simplifying your systems, decluttering your environment, saying no to distractions, these create space for what truly matters. The fewer decisions you have to make, the more power you have for the decisions that count. Minimalism in habits is elegance in action. You also learn to measure differently. Instead of asking, "Did I reach the goal yet?" you start asking, "Did I move one step closer today?" You measure success by direction, not distance. This shift quiets perfectionism and invites peace. Because the truth is, the moment you act in alignment with your values, you've already succeeded. The outcome will arrive in its own time. Even setbacks become teachers. Missing a habit isn't failure, it's feedback. It shows you where friction still lives, where systems need adjustment. When you respond with curiosity instead of guilt, every mistake becomes data for refinement. The goal is never punishment, it's awareness. Awareness brings you back to the present, and presence is where change lives. As you grow more self-aware, you'll see how deeply habits intertwine with emotion. Many patterns you want to change aren't logical. They're emotional responses to stress, boredom, or loneliness. Trying to overpower emotion with logic rarely works. Instead, design habits that meet the emotional need in healthier ways. If you crave comfort, find it in movement, conversation, or nature rather than avoidance. When you understand the need beneath the habit, you can fulfill it consciously instead of unconsciously. The same is true for motivation. It rises and falls with emotion. That's why systems matter more. They don't depend on feelings. You can design your environment to carry you when willpower fades. A planner left open, a meal prepped in advance, a reminder on the wall, these small cues hold you when discipline feels distant. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Good design replaces the need for constant self-control. There's also grace in allowing imperfection. Some days will be messy, some habits will lag, but each imperfect attempt still plants a seed. What matters most is that you keep tending the garden. The harvest never arrives overnight. The soil of self-growth needs time, care, and forgiveness. Perfection is sterile. Progress is alive. Over time, you'll notice how identity quietly shifts beneath the surface. You start thinking differently. Instead of, "I have to," you think, "I choose to." Instead of, "I should," you think, "I want to." Your language changes, and with it, your experience of effort changes too. Choice brings empowerment. Obligation brings resistance. The more you connect habits to freedom rather than duty, the easier they feel. Sometimes you'll outgrow habits that once served you. That's not regression, it's evolution. A habit that built structure in one season might feel constraining in another. When that happens, thank it and release it. Create a new version that fits who you've become. Renewal keeps habits alive. Reinvention keeps you expanding. You are allowed to change your mind without losing your progress. In relationships, habits play a quiet but profound role. A kind word, a gentle tone, a moment of presence repeated daily builds intimacy far stronger than grand gestures. Trust itself is a habit formed by consistency over time. Every time you keep your word, you reinforce safety. Every time you listen fully, you build connection. The same principles that build success build love. In teams and communities, shared habits create culture. The behaviors a group repeats become its identity. A workplace that habitually shares credit becomes collaborative. A family that habitually eats together becomes close. A community that habitually helps one another becomes resilient. Culture is simply a collection of collective habits sustained by shared values. As your personal and collective habits mature, clarity deepens. You start noticing subtle cause and effect patterns everywhere. When you sleep well, your patience grows. When you speak kindly, tension dissolves. When you move daily, creativity blooms. Life begins to reveal its own feedback loops, and you become a conscious participant instead of a passive observer. This awareness turns everyday living into a form of art. The true reward of mastering habits isn't achievement, it's presence. You become more awake to your own life. The energy once wasted on indecision and self-criticism is freed for creation, connection, and joy. You realize success was never about control. It was about harmony. Systems give structure, awareness gives flexibility, and together they create balance. The book ends where it began. Small habits, big difference. But now you understand the depth behind that simplicity. Small habits are small only in size, not in power. They are the molecules of progress, the invisible engines of transformation. Every major change begins not with a revolution, but with a subtle daily choice. You've learned to trust those choices, to honor their quiet magic. When you start acting as if your actions matter, they begin to. That's the real secret of atomic habits. They restore your sense of agency. They remind you that your future isn't decided by fate, but by patterns you practice. The next time you catch yourself thinking that progress is too slow or that goals are too far away, remember, the point of all this isn't to reach a finish line. It's to become someone who walks the path well. Sometimes, change begins so quietly that you barely notice it happening. A week passes, then a month, and suddenly you realize the things that once required effort have become effortless. You no longer debate with yourself about whether to show up. You simply do. The friction that used to slow you down fades until the action feels like breathing. This is the invisible threshold where habit becomes identity. Once you cross it, life begins to feel smoother, lighter, and strangely calm. This calm doesn't mean complacency. It means you've learned to trust yourself. You've built enough evidence through repetition that you no longer need constant pep talks. The voice of self-doubt grows quieter because your behavior has become proof of your integrity. You are what you repeatedly do, and now what you repeatedly do is aligned with who you want to be. Confidence is no longer a wish. It's a record of small promises kept. At this point, the question shifts from, how do I start, to, how do I sustain? Habits that once needed focus now run automatically. But automatic doesn't mean unconscious. To keep them alive, you must stay aware. Awareness is the thread that keeps good systems fresh. Each season of life will test them differently, and without gentle updates, even strong habits can drift. Reflection turns automation into evolution. One of the simplest ways to stay aware is to review your week like an artist stepping back from a canvas. Look without judgment. Notice where color or energy feels off. Ask yourself, what felt smooth? What felt forced? What needs more light? A 5-minute review brings weeks of clarity. It prevents small misalignments from growing into burnout. You are both the painter and the painting. You refine yourself through observation. James Clear often reminds us that systems are living things. They require maintenance, not perfection. If one part stops working, fix the part, not the person. This mindset keeps change compassionate. It removes shame and replaces it with curiosity. Instead of saying, I failed, you ask, what design would make this easier next time? Each iteration makes your environment more supportive and your habits more sustainable. Even small optimizations matter. You might move a reminder from your phone to your mirror where you'll actually see it. You might set a bedtime alarm to signal winding down instead of forcing discipline late at night. You might batch similar tasks together to reduce mental switching. Every micro tweak removes friction and frees energy. Over time, those energies accumulate into flow. Flow is the state we reach when skill meets challenge at the perfect balance. It's the feeling of total immersion time, dissolves, focus sharpens, the work feels almost effortless. Habits create the conditions for flow by removing distractions and decision fatigue. Once the basics of your routine are automatic, your mind has the bandwidth to go deeper. Routine is not the enemy of creativity. It's the soil that nourishes it. Still, boredom will visit even the most disciplined. When it does, see it as an invitation rather than a problem. Boredom is simply the absence of novelty. Inject curiosity back into your habits. Change the scenery. Learn a new variation. Invite a friend to join you, or track a different metric. Novelty revives engagement, but don't chase it endlessly too much. Variety scatters energy. Balance stability with small sparks of freshness. Another subtle danger of long-term success is ego. When habits start working, pride can quietly replace humility. You might begin to believe you're beyond the basics, that fundamentals are for beginners. But the fundamentals are the foundation. Forgetting them is how mastery unravels. The best in any field keep revisiting what others overlook. They polish simple skills until they shine. True mastery is humble. It bows to repetition. Clear calls this the cycle of endless refinement. Each return to the basics reveals new depth. The movement of the athlete, the phrasing of the musician, the tone of the communicator, all become more precise with awareness. Improvement becomes microscopic, but impact becomes profound. Growth shifts from external expansion to internal precision. You're not doing more. You're doing less, better. The more you grow, the more you realize how interconnected everything is. Good health supports focus. Focus supports relationships. Relationships support joy. You can't isolate improvement to one area. A single positive habit often sets off a chain reaction of better choices. Clear calls this the compounding nature of self-improvement. One habit acts as a keystone, holding others together. Find yours the small change that makes other changes easier, and protect it fiercely. For many, that keystone is sleep. For others, movement or morning reflection. Once you identify it, build your day around it. Guard the first few hours of your morning like sacred ground. They often determine the quality of everything that follows. Simple anchors like stretching, journaling, or a few quiet breaths before screens can redirect the entire tone of a day. You don't need complex rituals, just consistent beginnings. When your day begins with intention, momentum carries you. Momentum is one of the most underestimated forces in human behavior. Starting is the hardest part, but once you're in motion, inertia works in your favor. That's why the 2-minute rule matters so much. Small starts generate movement, and movement dissolves resistance. You can't steer a parked car, but once it's rolling, even slowly, direction becomes easy to adjust. You'll also notice how success creates new challenges. As you achieve goals, your standards rise. This can be healthy if guided by gratitude, but dangerous if driven by comparison. Comparison is a thief that disguises itself as ambition. It convinces you that your progress isn't enough because someone else's timeline looks faster. But the game of growth has no finish line and no opponents, only participants on different laps. Measure backward. Compare yourself to who you were, not to who others are. When you keep your focus inward, gratitude grows. Gratitude reinforces satisfaction, and satisfaction reinforces habits. The cycle continues positively. Awareness brings appreciation. Appreciation brings consistency. Consistency brings results. And results bring more gratitude. It's a quiet, upward spiral, fueled by appreciation instead of anxiety. Sometimes people worry that habits make life robotic, but that's a misunderstanding. Habits don't make you less human. They make you more available for humanity. When the basics are automated, you have more attention for creativity, love, and presence. You spend less energy on remembering to do the simple things and more on experiencing them deeply. The routine clears the noise so the music of life can be heard. Eventually, as Clear describes, you reach a point where improvement is less about addition and more about alignment. You're not learning new skills every day. You're harmonizing the ones you already have. You're fine-tuning. This stage is subtle yet profound. It's where you begin to live deliberately. Every choice feels intentional. Every small act becomes an expression of your values. Identity solidifies through this repetition. But remember, identity is flexible. Growth doesn't require betraying who you are. It requires expanding who you are. You can hold new roles and qualities without losing your core. A seed doesn't abandon itself when it becomes a tree. It simply fulfills its potential. In the same way, your new habits aren't changing you into someone else. They're revealing who you've always been. There's also a deeper level of reward beyond pride or progress. It's peace. When your actions consistently reflect your values, inner conflict dissolves. Life feels congruent. You trust yourself. Others trust you. And the world responds to that harmony. It's not perfection. It's coherence. Each small habit is a thread, and together they weave a steady, grounded life. In the final analysis, atomic habits are less about doing and more about becoming. They're a daily practice of remembering what matters. Each repetition is a whisper. This is the life I choose. And over time, those whispers grow into a chorus. The volume of your intention becomes the soundtrack of your days. That's when change stops being something you chase and becomes the person you are. And this is the quiet revolution James Clear invites you into, not the noisy chase for motivation, not the grand declarations of transformation, but the calm, steady artistry of small decisions done with love. A single degree warmer melts ice. A single word spoken kindly heals tension. A single moment of mindfulness interrupts years of reactivity. These are atomic moments. These are the molecules of a better life. The longer you live by intention, the more you notice how your attention itself becomes sacred. You stop scattering it across trivial distractions and start directing it like sunlight onto what you want to grow. Each focused moment nourishes something meaningful. Over days and months, the garden of your life begins to bloom exactly where you've been consistently looking. Attention is nourishment, and habits are the roots that absorb it. When you practice awareness this way, even ordinary acts become meditations. Making the bed becomes a statement of order. Washing a dish becomes a moment of gratitude for nourishment. Writing an email becomes an act of service. The repetition of small things turns living into art. You discover that success was never about grandeur, but about devotion to simplicity done well. Every now and then, you'll drift. Everyone does. Old patterns call like familiar songs. When you notice yourself slipping, smile. Awareness means the habit of noticing is still alive. Begin again from the smallest action. One clean breath, one clear choice, one atomic motion is enough to realign the day. That's the grace built into this philosophy. You're always one tiny habit away from being back on track. As your awareness deepens, you'll feel less urgency to control others or predict everything. You start to see that influence flows naturally from example. When you embody steadiness, people sense it. When you act with integrity, others respond. Your habits quietly radiate outward. You don't need to preach change. You become its evidence. Leadership begins with self-regulation. And self-regulation begins with these tiny, repeated votes for presence. Over time, the people around you begin to shift too. They feel the calm in your consistency. They trust your word because you live it. They mirror your patience, your boundaries, your optimism. This is how personal habits evolve into cultural ones. The collective world changes through individuals choosing to show up differently each day. A quiet morning routine might ripple out as kindness in a meeting, as patience in traffic, as generosity toward a stranger. Small causes, vast effects. Still, you must guard humility. The mind loves to label itself as someone who has mastered habits. But mastery is not a finish line. It's a practice of perpetual return. Each day you begin again. Yesterday's discipline does not guarantee today's clarity. When you forget this, pride seeps in, and pride blinds awareness. Stay teachable. Let every success remind you that systems, not ego, carried you here. Sometimes progress means pruning. You'll find habits that once empowered you now consume time or energy without purpose. Release them gently. Life changes, seasons shift, and a wise gardener cuts branches to let new ones flourish. Don't cling to an identity that no longer fits. Reinvention is a sign of health. What remains after pruning is focused strong, clean, and ready for deeper growth. There's a quiet confidence that grows inside you when your outer actions and inner intentions align. Decisions become simpler. You know your priorities because you live them daily. Opportunities that once caused confusion sort themselves. They either fit your system or they don't. This clarity is freedom. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes it lighter. You are no longer pulled in directions that contradict who you are. Sometimes people ask, what if I fall completely off course? The answer is, you won't. Not as long as you remember that habits aren't chains. They're tools. You can pick them up again at any time. Even after months away, one act of recommitment reignites the pattern. The brain remembers faster than you think. The circuits of repetition never truly disappear. They wait for your next signal. Consistency forgives interruption when met with return. And as you continue this lifelong practice, something subtle but profound happens. The external achievements, the career milestones, the improved health, the orderly life become secondary. The deeper reward is peace. Peace in knowing that you are steering your days instead of being swept by them. Peace in trusting that small steps truly are enough. Peace in realizing you've learned the rare art of contented discipline. That peace becomes contagious. You start to seek it in all areas, in your finances, in your relationships, in your community. The principles are the same everywhere. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. Wherever you apply these 4 laws, order grows. Wherever you ignore them, chaos creeps back in. It's not punishment. It's simply physics of human behavior. Systems shape outcomes. Eventually, you begin to sense that these laws mirror something deeper in nature itself. Seeds need cues of light and warmth before they sprout, make it obvious. Bees visit flowers that are bright and sweet, make it attractive. Rivers flow through paths of least resistance, make it easy. And life itself rewards cycles that sustain it, make it satisfying. Our biology and the world's ecology follow the same patterns. You are part of that rhythm, not separate from it. Understanding this brings reverence. Each habit becomes a small way of cooperating with life's natural intelligence. Breathing deeply before you react, drinking water when you wake, speaking kindly, even under stress, these are micro-alignments with the larger order. You stop seeing habits as personal projects and start seeing them as participation in harmony. That awareness turns discipline into devotion. You'll notice, too, that joy increases in proportion to presence. When routines run smoothly, your mind relaxes, and joy fills the space where stress used to live. Joy, not pleasure, the quiet satisfaction of being in sync with yourself. It's the joy of finishing something you started, of noticing a sunrise because you weren't rushing, of realizing that your life now feels like something you'd choose again. That's the ultimate sign of well-built habits. You enjoy being you. As time stretches on, you'll gather evidence that small things truly rule the world. Empires rise and fall on tiny decisions multiplied. Relationships thrive or crumble on small daily interactions. Health expands or erodes through minute choices of movement and food. The scale may change, but the pattern doesn't. The atomic scale governs the cosmic. Every atom of behavior carries potential energy, so you keep tending the small things. You know now that greatness is granular. You honor every repetition, every gentle return, every honest correction. You no longer seek shortcuts because you've experienced the beauty of process. And that realization liberates you. The chase ends, the living begins. When you reach this understanding, you see that Atomic Habits was never really a book about productivity. It was a book about presence, about designing a life that reflects what matters most, about realizing that being consistent with love and awareness is the most revolutionary act of all. Each morning offers you that revolution anew. The simplest questions lead the way. What identity will I vote for today? What one small act would make my future self proud? What can I refine? What can I release? What can I celebrate? Ask, act, observe, repeat. That loop cue, craving, response, reward, is no longer mechanical. It's alive, beating softly inside your day, like a quiet drum. And when the day ends, and you rest, knowing you lived it with intention, that's success. Not the trophies or the metrics, but the feeling that your time was well used and your energy well given. That is the satisfaction. The fourth law points toward the reward of alignment. Sleep, reset, and begin again. Each sunrise is the sound of possibility repeating itself. Evening arrives softly. The world grows quiet, and reflection settles in like a gentle tide. You look back over the day and realize that what once felt like effort now feels like rhythm. There's satisfaction in that rhythm, the way brushing your teeth, stretching, checking in with your goals, and showing gratitude all weave together without strain. You begin to understand that the deepest success isn't in intensity but in flow. Flow born from care, not force. You start noticing more connections between cause and effect. When you sleep well, your focus sharpens. When you eat with awareness, your energy steadies. When you move your body, your mind becomes lighter. It's all linked, everything influencing everything else. You're not a set of separate systems, but a single ecosystem. Each small action nourishes the others. This awareness changes how you approach improvement. Instead of chasing isolated goals, you nurture harmony. You ask, what's the smallest change that could make the biggest ripple across the whole system? Maybe it's simply going to bed half an hour earlier. Maybe it's journaling each evening to clear your mind. Tiny adjustments create disproportionate effects because they interact with everything around them. In these moments of awareness, gratitude naturally grows. Gratitude for the ability to choose again, for the simple miracle of awareness itself. You start to see gratitude not as something to perform, but as something that naturally blooms when you slow down enough to notice. Gratitude is the emotional signature of presence, and presence is the soil where all good habits grow. As days pass, you realize that your relationship to time has changed. You no longer feel like you're racing through it. The rush fades because you trust your direction. You aren't trying to cram progress into each minute. You're building progress into the structure of the day itself. Time expands when you stop fighting it. You no longer need urgency to feel alive. Rhythm is enough. People begin to notice. They might say you seem calmer, clearer, more grounded. But it isn't something you perform, it's something that radiates naturally. This steadiness draws opportunities and people who match that frequency. You become a magnet for what aligns with peace, because you've stopped resonating with chaos. This is how internal habits quietly shape the external world. Still, there will be storms. You'll have days when everything feels messy, and you question whether the work still matters. Those are the days when the habits matter most. When motivation is gone, structure holds you. Even a small act, writing one line, walking 5 minutes, taking 3 deep breaths, keeps the thread unbroken. The point of the habit is not to prevent storms, but to give you shelter through them. There's a quiet confidence that grows from enduring these storms with grace. You learn that consistency doesn't mean being unshakable. It means returning to center quickly. Life stops feeling like a series of disruptions and starts feeling like a conversation between chaos and calm. You learn to dance with it rather than fight it. That dance is the essence of resilience. As you deepen this practice, you also become more compassionate with others. You recognize their struggles as reflections of your own. You no longer judge inconsistency in others harshly because you've seen how fragile discipline can be. Compassion replaces comparison. Curiosity replaces criticism. You become someone who uplifts rather than competes, who inspires quietly just by living well. This is the invisible gift of habits. They don't just make you productive, they make you kind. They clear the noise that makes people defensive or reactive. When your life runs on systems that support peace, you have energy left for empathy. You start to notice the people who need encouragement, the moments when silence helps more than advice, the subtle ways connection deepens when you're not rushing. At some point, you realize that the principles of atomic habits apply to love as much as to achievement. Relationships thrive on the same structure. Small, consistent acts of care that are obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. You listen before speaking. You celebrate others' wins. You apologize quickly. You create rituals of connection, a morning check-in, a shared meal, a kind message. These habits of attention sustain intimacy far longer than grand gestures ever could. The same laws apply to collective change. Societies shift through repeated small actions multiplied by millions of people. Cultural revolutions don't start with slogans. They start with daily choices that become norms. Each person who chooses kindness, patience, or courage plants seeds that eventually grow into forests of transformation. The micro always precedes the macro. In your personal world, you start feeling gratitude even for struggle. Difficulty becomes feedback. The days that challenge you reveal where your systems need reinforcement. Instead of resenting the test, you study it. Each setback becomes a teacher in disguise, showing you the weak joints that need strengthening. You stop labeling things as failures and start seeing them as experiments. Curiosity dissolves shame, and as shame fades, energy returns. You no longer waste effort hiding imperfections. You simply adjust and move forward. This is the grace of sustainable progress. It frees you from the perfection trap. You don't need to prove you're flawless. You just need to keep learning. Each iteration makes the next one easier. Soon, the line between effort and ease begins to blur. What once felt forced now feels natural. You've practiced enough that discipline has turned into instinct. You wake up and naturally reach for behaviors that once required planning. The system has become self-sustaining. You realize you've crossed a quiet threshold. Your habits now carry you. But even here, awareness remains essential. Without it, automation can drift into mindlessness. So you return to reflection again and again, not as a chore, but as a sacred pause. The pause keeps the system alive. In that pause, you recalibrate, remember your values, and refresh your gratitude. The pause is where consciousness breathes. From this place of steadiness, you begin to sense a deeper intelligence at work. Every time you honor a habit, every time you choose a small good action, something larger moves through you. Life itself seems to support you. Doors open, synchronicities appear, and opportunities align. It isn't magic, it's alignment. When your inner systems mirror the natural rhythms of life, you experience cooperation instead of resistance. And so the cycle continues. Awareness, intention, repetition, reward. It never ends, but it does deepen. What once felt like self-improvement now feels like participation in something bigger. You're no longer fixing yourself. You're expressing yourself more clearly. Growth becomes less about striving and more about unfolding. By now, you've internalized the heart of atomic habits. Every small act is sacred. Each decision, each repetition, each gentle correction carries weight. The difference between a life that drifts and a life that fulfills its potential lies in these microscopic choices. Change doesn't demand heroism. It demands honesty, a willingness to look at today's smallest next step and take it. When you live this way, the future takes care of itself. Big dreams no longer intimidate you because you understand how they're built one repetition at a time. You start thinking generationally rather than instantaneously. You ask how your current patterns will echo years from now, what kind of legacy your daily choices are composing. Legacy, after all, is nothing more than compounded habit. So tonight, as you rest, you can feel a quiet pride. Not the loud pride of accomplishment, but the soft pride of consistency. You've kept showing up. You've honored the small things. You've practiced the art of being human with awareness and care. That's the essence of this work, transforming ordinary days into extraordinary evidence that small, consistent goodness still changes the world. Morning comes again, and you realize that what used to feel like repetition now feels like rhythm. The day opens in a way you know by heart, the small rituals that anchor you, the choices that once took effort but now unfold on their own. There's a quiet satisfaction in seeing how far you've come without drama or grand announcements. Progress has become the atmosphere you live in. Each breath, each small action, is a reminder that change isn't an event, but a relationship you maintain with yourself. The coffee brewing, the journal open, the shoes waiting by the door, all these details are cues in a conversation between who you were and who you're becoming. You've learned that growth doesn't require struggle, it requires attention. The beauty of habits is that they free the mind to be present. The energy that used to be scattered across endless decisions now flows toward creation, empathy, and joy. You have more room inside yourself for wonder. When the basics of life run smoothly, the soul can explore. That's the secret gift of discipline. It clears the way for curiosity. Sometimes you catch yourself smiling for no reason at all. You notice the light falling differently, or the sound of a friend's laugh, or the way your body feels strong in motion. This, too, is the result of small habits. They've taught you to notice, to stay, to breathe. You understand now that peace was never the absence of movement, it was movement done with care. In moments like these, you realize how much your perception has changed. You used to see time as something to manage. Now you see it as something to experience. Habits have turned minutes into meaning. A day once felt like a race. Now it feels like a rhythm you can dance with. When life's pace shifts, you don't fight the beat, you adjust your step. Even challenge feels different. Instead of seeing obstacles as interruptions, you see them as invitations. When something disrupts your flow, you ask, what is this teaching me about my system? Maybe you need a simpler cue, a softer reminder, a bit more rest. Problems no longer feel personal. They feel mechanical, fixable. That perspective turns frustration into empowerment. This approach spills into every relationship. You no longer expect perfection from others because you've stopped demanding it from yourself. You've learned how much patience small change requires. So when someone around you struggles, you meet them with understanding instead of judgment. That empathy becomes its own habit, the habit of grace. You also learn to celebrate differently. Instead of waiting for big milestones, you find joy in consistency itself. A streak maintained, a promise kept, a boundary honored, these become reasons to celebrate. Gratitude shifts from something you practice occasionally to something you live by default. Every small success adds another layer of calm confidence. And yet, through all of this progress, humility remains essential. The moment you think, I've mastered this, life changes shape and invites you to learn again. A new job, a move, a loss, a joy, each brings fresh rhythms that require fresh systems. You start again, but this time, starting doesn't scare you. You've practiced beginning so many times that it feels familiar. Starting over is no longer failure, it's renewal. You see this principle in nature too. Trees shed leaves every year, not because they're dying, but because it's how they live. The shedding makes space for new growth. The cycle repeats endlessly, and yet the tree stands rooted. You learn to live like that, rooted in your values, flexible in your habits. Each season asks for different expressions of the same integrity. When you reflect on the path that brought you here, the pattern becomes clear. Every meaningful transformation began with something small, a single moment of honesty, a single act of courage, a single decision to try again. None of them looked heroic at the time, but together they shaped an entirely different life. This realization humbles you and strengthens you at once. James Clear's message comes alive in your own experience. Time amplifies whatever you feed it. Feed it awareness, discipline, and kindness, and it multiplies those gifts back to you. Feed it confusion, distraction, or fear, and it amplifies those instead. You can't control time, but you can control what you plant in it. That truth puts power back in your hands. And as you keep walking this path, you start to sense that the work never really ends, but neither does the reward. The process becomes self-renewing. Each day's practice refuels the desire to keep practicing. Each small result proves the system works. You begin to see why Clear calls these habits atomic. Not because they're tiny, but because they contain explosive potential. Potential for what? For presence, for purpose, for a life that feels true. The external achievements matter, but they're simply reflections of internal alignment. The real wealth is steadiness. The real success is being able to trust yourself. The real freedom is knowing that your days belong to you. Sometimes you imagine explaining all of this to your younger self, the one who thought change had to be dramatic, who believed motivation was everything. You tell them, it's simpler than you think, and harder too, because it asks for patience. You'd tell them that starting small doesn't mean thinking small, that gentleness can coexist with ambition. You'd tell them that becoming consistent is just another way of becoming kind. If there's a secret to lasting transformation, it's tenderness. Treating your own growth like a garden rather than a battlefield. Encouraging the sprouts instead of judging the soil. Progress built on pressure eventually cracks. Progress built on care endures. Tender consistency is the most underestimated force in the world. As you come to the close of this journey, the 4 laws echo softly in everything you do. You make your intentions obvious. You write them down. You place reminders where your eyes will fall. You make them attractive by pairing them with joy, with music, with community. You make them easy by designing simplicity into your space, reducing friction until good choices feel natural. And you make them satisfying by celebrating each repetition, by feeling the quiet pride of following through. These laws are not steps to complete, but companions to live with. They'll evolve as you do. Some seasons will emphasize ease, others attraction, others awareness. Together they form a compass you can always return to when you feel lost. You no longer need rigid discipline. You have direction. When you understand this, you also see that Atomic Habits was never about becoming superhuman. It was about becoming fully human. Remembering that your brain, your body, and your environment are partners in change, not obstacles to it. Remembering that the smallest deliberate act carries meaning. Remembering that repetition isn't monotony, it's devotion. So, as this reflection nears its end, you sit quietly with one last truth. Small habits don't just change what you do, they change what you notice. They train your mind to look for growth instead of lack, for possibility instead of limitation. They turn the act of living into the art of paying attention. And maybe that's the whole point. To pay attention, to notice your own becoming, to live each day as both student and teacher of your own life, to realize that your days are short, your choices sacred, and your ability to begin again infinite. You exhale, smile, and know that tomorrow you'll wake to the same invitation, one small action, one more vote for the life you want, and that is enough. And now we come to the end of this reflection on Atomic Habits. You've walked through the quiet power of tiny actions, seen how small improvements compound into transformation, and learned that identity, not intensity, is what makes change last. James Clear's message is simple but radical. You do not need to overhaul your life overnight. You only need to make small, consistent choices that move you 1% closer each day. If you fall, return. If you drift, notice. Each new moment is another chance to cast a vote for the person you wish to become. Remember the 4 guiding laws. Make your habits obvious so you can't ignore what matters. Make them attractive so you look forward to growth instead of fearing it. Make them easy so success becomes frictionless. And make them satisfying so every small win feels worth repeating. Behind all of this lies one deeper truth. You are not broken. You are building. Your life is a collection of small patterns, and you hold the pen that writes them. Every breath, every choice, every repeated action is a brushstroke in the story of who you are becoming. So as this audio ends, let the work continue quietly in your own life. Notice the cue that greets you tomorrow morning. Respond with intention. Celebrate the smallest victory. Let the rhythm of atomic change carry you forward, gently, faithfully, day after day. Because real success isn't sudden. It's subtle, patient, and beautifully human. And it begins always with one small habit today. Thank you for listening. Empower Audio.